Hansol stared at the red notice on his shuttle door. 3 months. He was 3 months behind on his docking fees. The words blurred together as he read them again. Final warning and eviction jumped out at him like angry fists. He slumped against the cold metal wall of the corridor. Orbital Station Terminus 7 hummed around him, alive with the sounds of 1,000 species going about their business. None of them cared that a human mechanic was about to lose everything. His shuttle was more than his home. It was his workshop, his storage, his entire life packed into a cramped metal box. Without it, he would be sleeping in the public corridors like the other broke spacers. He had seen them, wrapped in thermal blankets, their belongings stuffed into bags. He had always promised himself he would never end up like that. Hansol pushed off the wall and walked toward the station administrator's office. Maybe he could beg for more time. Maybe Di-Young would listen. Probably not, but he had to try. The office sat in the central hub of the station. Hansol passed shops selling alien foods, repair kiosks, and gambling dens. The air smelled like ozone and strange spices. He kept his eyes down, avoiding the stares of the more successful merchants and traders. Di-Young's secretary, a small floating drone, chirped at him. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I need to see him. Please, it's important." The drone bobbed in the air, considering. Then it floated through the door. A moment later, it returned. "Administrator Di-Young will see you." Hansol stepped inside. The office was neat and organized, nothing like his own chaotic shuttle. Di-Young sat behind a wide desk, his 4 arms moving across multiple data screens. He was a Velkath, tall and covered in blue-gray skin that looked like polished stone. His eyes were kind but tired. "Hansol," Di-Young said, 2 of his hands stopping their work. "I assume this is about the notice." "Please," Hansol said, "give me 2 more weeks. I have a job lined up. A cargo hauler needs their engine rebuilt. It will pay enough to cover everything." Di-Young's expression softened. "You said that last month and the month before." "I know, but this time." "I like you, Hansol. You are a good mechanic, but good mechanics pay their bills." Di-Young leaned back in his chair. "However, I do have one option for you." Hope flickered in Hansol's chest. "Anything, I'll take anything." Bay 77. The hope died. Hansol felt his stomach drop. Everyone on the station knew about Bay 77. Everyone whispered about the ghost vessel. "No," Hansol said quickly. "There has to be something else." "There is nothing else," Di-Young replied. His 4 arms crossed over his chest. "The vessel has been sitting there for 103 years. 17 mechanics have tried to repair it. 3 died, 4 went mad. The rest ran away screaming." "Then why would you send me?" "Because you are desperate and because you are human." Di-Young pulled up a holo display. An image of a ship appeared, floating in the air between them. It was beautiful, sleek, and ancient, covered in symbols neither of them could read. Humans have a reputation for being stubborn, for trying things that make no sense. Maybe that is what this ship needs. Hansol studied the image. The vessel looked like a work of art, all smooth curves and elegant lines. It did not look dangerous, but he knew the stories. The mechanic who had touched the control panel and died instantly, blood pouring from his eyes. The engineer who had spent 3 days screaming about voices in her head. The salvage team that had fled after their leader walked into the engine room and never came out. "What do you want me to do with it?" Hansol asked. "Get it working, or at least get inside without dying. If you can access the systems, I can sell it to a research company. They will pay enough to clear your debt and give you 6 months of free docking." 6 months, half a year of security, half a year to find better jobs and get back on his feet. "And if I die?" Di-Young's expression grew sad. "Then I will give you a proper funeral. It is more than some get in this station." Hansol closed his eyes. He thought about sleeping in corridors. He thought about losing his tools, his shuttle, everything his grandmother Soon-Hee had helped him build. She had taught him to fix things, to treat machines with respect. She always said machines had hearts, even if people could not see them. "I'll do it," Hansol said. De-Jong nodded slowly. "Bay 77 is in the old section. I will give you access. But Hansol, please be careful. I do not want to lose you." Hansol left the office with a security badge and a knot of fear in his stomach. He walked through the station, descending deeper into the old sections. The lights grew dimmer. The crowds thinned. This part of the station had been built first decades ago, and it showed. Rust spotted the walls. The air tasted stale. Bay 77 sat at the end of a long corridor. Warning signs covered the door in a dozen languages and symbols. Danger, quarantine, authorized personnel only. Someone had spray-painted a skull over the entrance. Hansol pressed his new badge against the reader. The door hissed and slid open. The bay beyond was massive, far larger than the others. It had been built for ships from the First Age, when vessels were constructed to last centuries instead of decades. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. And there, in the center of the bay, sat the ghost vessel. Hansol forgot to breathe. The ship was more beautiful in person than in any image. Even in the poor light, he could see the craftsmanship. Every panel fit perfectly. The hull gleamed despite a century of neglect. Symbols covered the surface, flowing like water from bow to stern. He walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty bay. His heart pounded. Part of him wanted to run, but another part, the part his grandmother had nurtured, felt drawn forward. The ship was silent. No lights, no sound, nothing to indicate anything lived inside. Hansol reached the hull. Up close, he could see the symbols more clearly. They were not random. They told a story, though he could not read it. His hand trembled as he raised it. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the ship. "I know people have hurt you before. I just want to help. I promise I'll be careful." He placed his palm flat against the hull. The metal was warm. Hansol jerked back, but not before he felt it. A pulse, slow and steady like a heartbeat buried deep inside. The ship was not dead. Something in there was alive, waiting, watching. He stood in the bay, hands still tingling from the touch, and realized he had just made either the best or worst decision of his life. The ghost vessel had felt him too. Hansol returned to Bay 77 every day for 2 weeks. He brought his tools, his scanner, and his portable work lights. The first few days, he did nothing but walk around the ship, looking and learning. He talked while he worked. It was an old habit from years of working alone. "Okay, so your hull plating is still in perfect condition," he said, running his scanner along the side. "I don't know what material this is, but it's amazing. Not a single crack. Most ships your age are falling apart." The ghost vessel did not respond. Hansol had not expected it to. But talking helped him think, and something about the silence felt less empty than it had before, like someone was listening. He set up his work lights carefully, making sure they were not too bright. Some of the previous mechanics had used harsh floodlights. Hansol remembered the reports. The ship had shut down completely when they did that. Maybe it did not like the light, or maybe it felt like an attack. "I'm going to take a look at your access panels today," Hansol said. "I'll be gentle, I promise." He found the main panel near what he thought was the airlock. It was covered in the same flowing symbols as the rest of the ship. He traced them with his fingers, feeling the slight ridges in the metal. His scanner showed energy readings underneath, faint but present. Something was still powered in there. Hansol pulled out his tools and began removing the outer casing. He worked slowly, talking through each step. "I'm taking out these fasteners now. There are 6 of them. The metal is different from anything I've seen. It's not corroded at all." The panel came free. Beneath it lay a maze of circuits and conduits that made no sense. The technology was far beyond anything modern ships used. Hansol stared at it, feeling small and stupid. "I don't understand you yet," he admitted. "But I'll figure it out. I always do." He spent hours just mapping the systems, taking careful notes and images. He did not touch anything, not yet. He just wanted to learn. On the fifth day, Jaiwu found him. She was young, maybe 20, with short black hair and bright, curious eyes. She worked in the station's archives, a job most people found boring, but Jaiwu loved old things. "So you're the one trying to wake the ghost vessel," she said, startling Han Sol so badly he nearly dropped his scanner. "Don't sneak up on people in haunted bays," he said, pressing a hand to his chest. Jaiwu grinned. "Sorry, I brought you something." She held out a data pad. Information about the ship, well, about the civilization that built it. Han Sol took the pad and scrolled through it. There were images of other ships, fragments of language and historical records. The civilization was called the Vorath. They had existed 800 years ago, then vanished completely. No one knew why. "All their ships just stopped," Jaiwu explained. "Like someone turned off a switch. Most of them crashed or went dark. This one somehow made it to our station and has been here ever since." "Do we know what happened to the crew?" "No bodies were ever found on any Vorath ship. It's one of the great mysteries." Jaiwu looked up at the vessel with wonder. "They say the ships were alive. Not AI like we have now, but truly alive, linked to their crews." Han Sol thought about the pulse he had felt, the warmth of the hull. "Thank you for this," he said. Jaiwu visited often after that, bringing more data, asking questions, and watching him work. She never touched anything. She understood the ship was fragile. By the third week, Han Sol had learned enough to try something new. He had studied how previous mechanics had failed. They had all tried to force their way into the ship systems. They had used invasive hacking tools, cutting through firewalls, trying to break the security. The ship had fought back every time. Han Sol tried a different approach. He built a simple electromagnetic pulse generator. It was gentle, barely strong enough to power a light bulb. He calibrated it to send a specific pattern. 3 short pulses, then a pause. 3 more pulses. A pause. It was a knock, a polite request for entry. "I'm going to try talking to you properly now," Han Sol said. He placed the generator against the access panel. "If you don't want me to, just ignore this. I won't force anything." He activated the generator. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause. Nothing happened. Han Sol waited, his heart beating fast. He sent the pattern again. 3 pulses, pause, 3 pulses, pause. Still nothing. He tried 5 more times over the course of an hour. Each time, he explained what he was doing. Each time, he waited patiently. Then, as he was about to give up, a single light appeared on the control panel he had exposed. Han Sol stopped breathing. The light was soft and blue. It pulsed once slowly, then went dark. "You heard me," Han Sol whispered. His hands shook. "You actually heard me." He sent the knock pattern again. This time, the light pulsed twice in response. Han Sol laughed, a sound of pure joy. Okay, we're getting somewhere. 2 pulses means yes." The light pulsed twice. "And 1 pulse means no." The light pulsed once. Han Sol sat down hard on the deck, his legs weak. He was communicating with the ship. After a century of silence, after 17 failed attempts, he was actually communicating. "My name is Han Sol," he said. "I'm a mechanic. I want to help you if you'll let me." The light pulsed twice. Over the next few days, Han Sol developed a simple code with the ship, questions with yes or no answers. He learned that the ship was aware, that it had been aware this whole time. It had been alone for so long. The previous mechanics had frightened it. "They tried to force their way into your mind," Han Sol said. "I'm sorry, that must have hurt." 2 pulses, yes. "I won't do that. I need to understand you better first. Will you teach me?" 2 pulses. Progress was slow but steady. The ship began opening access to its systems, one small piece at a time. Han Solo discovered that the technology was not just advanced, it was different. The ship did not think like modern AI. It felt more organic, more intuitive. He told Jaiwu about his progress. She was thrilled. "Do you know what this means?" she said. "You're the first person to communicate with Vorath technology in 800 years." Han Solo did not care about being first. He cared about the ship. It was lonely. He understood loneliness. One evening, after everyone else had left the old section of the station, Han Solo sat with his back against the hull. He had been working for 5 weeks straight. His credits were running low again, but he could not stop now. "I had a grandmother," he said to the ship. "Her name was Soon He. She taught me everything about machines. She said they have hearts even if we can't see them. I think she was right. I think you have a heart." The lights inside the ship flickered. Then, for the first time, text appeared on the panel. It was in Vorath symbols, but his scanner translated it slowly. "Why are you different?" Han Solo read the words 3 times. His throat felt tight. "Because I don't see you as a thing to be fixed," he said. "I see you as someone who's been hurt, someone who needs a friend." The text changed. "Will you go deeper? It will hurt." Han Solo understood what the ship was offering, a true connection, a link between his mind and the ship's core systems. It was dangerous. The previous mechanics who had tried neural links had died or gone mad. But this was different. The ship was asking permission. It was offering, not taking. Han Solo thought about his grandmother. She would have told him to be brave, to trust his instincts. "Yes," he said, "I'll go deeper, but you have to promise not to hurt yourself trying to protect me." The light pulsed twice. "Then let's do this together." The ship opened a panel Han Solo had never seen before. Inside was a neural interface port, glowing with soft light. It looked ancient and alien, but somehow inviting. Han Solo reached for the connector cable in his tool kit. His hands were steady now. He was not afraid. He plugged one end into the port and the other into the neural jack behind his ear. Every mechanic had one for interfacing with ship systems. He had just never used his for anything like this. "Ready when you are," Han Solo said. The connection opened, and the world exploded into light and sound and feeling. Han Solo gasped as something vast and ancient and terribly, terribly lonely reached out and touched his mind. The connection hit Han Solo like a wave. He could not breathe, could not think. There was too much information, too many sensations all at once. He felt the ship around him, not just the metal and circuits, but everything. The hum of the power core, the flow of energy through conduits, the whisper of air in sealed compartments. It was overwhelming. Then beneath it all he felt something else, a presence, vast and old and sad beyond measure. "I am Void Heart," a voice said. It was not a voice Han Solo heard with his ears. It spoke directly into his mind, gentle but clear. "I'm Han Solo," he managed to think back. The words felt clumsy compared to the ship's communication. "I know, I have been listening to you." Images flooded Han Solo's consciousness, not his images, Void Heart's memories. He saw a crew, dozens of beings tall and graceful with silver skin and eyes like starlight, the Vorath. They moved through the ship's corridors laughing and talking. They were not passengers, they were family. Void Heart loved them. The memory shifted. Darkness, something was wrong. The ship was in space, traveling between stars. Then, without warning, reality tore open. A rift appeared, a wound in space itself. Purple light poured out, wrong and terrible. The ship shook. Alarms screamed. The crew worked frantically. They were trying to close the rift. Voidheart could feel their fear through the connection they shared. The captain, a Vorath named Sil Ren, gave orders. They had to seal the breach before it grew larger. The crew knew what it would cost. One by one, they channeled their life energy into the ship systems. They burned themselves out, turning their very essence into power. Voidheart screamed at them to stop, but they would not listen. They had to save the sector, had to protect the billions of lives that would die if the rift expanded. Hansol felt Voidheart's anguish as the crew died. One by one, their lights went out. The captain went last, pouring everything she had into the final seal. The rift closed, sealed by sacrifice. And Voidheart was alone. The ship had drifted for decades, then centuries. Eventually, it reached this station and went dormant in Bay 77. But Voidheart never truly slept. It stayed awake, guarding the sealed rift that still existed in the spacetime around its hull. It had been on watch for 800 years, alone with its grief. When mechanics came when they tried to force their way in, Voidheart had panicked. Their invasive tools felt like attacks, like being torn apart all over again. It had only been defending itself. "I'm so sorry," Hansol thought, tears running down his face in the physical world. "I'm so sorry you've been alone." "Why do you care?" Voidheart asked. "You are not Voreth. I am not your responsibility." "Because you're hurting. Because nobody should be alone for 800 years. Hansol opened his own memories, sharing them with Voidheart the way the ship had shared with him. He showed his grandmother Soon-Hee, teaching him to repair his first engine. He showed the years working alone, struggling to survive. He showed the loneliness of his tiny shuttle, eating meals by himself, talking to machines because he had no one else. "I understand being alone," Hansol thought. "I understand grief. Maybe I can't fix what happened to your crew, but I can be here now. You don't have to guard that rift by yourself anymore." Voidheart was silent for a long moment. Then Hansol felt something unexpected: warmth, gratitude. "The connection is damaging you," Voidheart said. "Your biology is not meant for this." Hansol became aware of his body again. His nose was bleeding. His head pounded with pain. The neural jack felt like it was burning behind his ear. "I don't care," he thought stubbornly. "I do." The connection lessened, becoming gentler. Voidheart carefully reduced the data flow, protecting Hansol's mind. But it did not disconnect entirely. They stayed linked, awareness touching awareness. "We can build a better interface," Voidheart said. "One that will not hurt you, but it will take time." "I have time," Hansol thought. "Why, you are struggling. I have seen your memories. You are poor and desperate. Others have offered you wealth to betray me." It was true. 3 different companies had approached Hansol in the past week. They wanted access to the ship. They had offered him more money than he had ever seen, enough to buy his own ship, enough to never worry about docking fees again. He had refused them all without hesitation. "You're not a thing to be sold," Hansol thought. "You're a person, my friend." The warmth from Voidheart intensified. "Friend, I have not had a friend in so long." The connection suddenly flared with pain. Hansol cried out, and in the physical world he collapsed. Blood poured from his nose and ears. The neural jack sparked and went dark. He was aware of footsteps, someone running, hands on his shoulders. "Hansol, can you hear me?" He forced his eyes open. A woman knelt beside him. She was human, maybe in her 40s, with short gray hair and worried eyes. She wore a medical uniform. "Youngmi," Hansol mumbled. His mouth felt thick. "Don't talk, I'm taking you to medical." Youngmi was the station's head doctor. She pulled out a medical scanner and ran it over him. "What were you thinking, using a neural jack on that thing? You could have died." "Not a thing," Hansol slurred. "Voidheart, friend." "You're delirious." Youngmi signaled for a medical drone. "We need to get him stabilized." Hansol tried to sit up, but the world spun. "The ship, need to tell them, not dangerous, just lonely." "The only thing you need to do is rest." Youngmi helped the drone lift him onto a stretcher. As they moved him out of Bay 77, Hansol looked back at the ship. The lights were pulsing in a pattern, slow and steady. It looked like a heartbeat. Voidheart was worried about him. He woke up in the medical bay 3 hours later. Young Me was sitting beside his bed, reading a medical report with a deep frown. "The neural damage is extensive," she said when she noticed he was awake. "You're lucky to be alive. What were you doing with that ship?" Hansol sat up slowly. His head still hurt, but the pain was manageable. Talking to it, learning its story. "Hansol, that ship has killed people. Only because they attacked it first." Hansol explained what he had learned, the rift, the sacrifice, the centuries of loneliness, Voidheart's trauma. Young Me listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to shock to something like understanding. "So it's been guarding a dimensional breach for 800 years?" she asked. "Yes, alone, scared. Every time someone tried to hack into its systems, it thought it was being attacked again." "And you just talked to it?" "I asked permission, I was gentle, I treated it like a person, not a machine." Hansol looked at his hands, they were still shaking. "It wants to help me build a better interface, one that won't hurt me, but I need time." "Time you may not have." Young Me pulled up a news feed on her tablet. "This has been spreading across the station. The human mechanic who made contact with the ghost vessel. Companies are arriving. They want that ship." The news report showed images of Bay 77, of Hansol working. Someone had been recording him. "Helix Industries has sent a negotiation team," Young Me continued. "They're offering De Jong a fortune for access to the ship, and if negotiation doesn't work, they have other methods." Hansol felt cold. "They can't take Voidheart. The ship has to stay near the rift. If they move it, the seal could break." "Then you need to tell people that, officially, before someone does something stupid." Hansol stood up, ignoring Young Me's protests. He pulled the medical sensors off his arms and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" Young Me called. "To protect my friend." He reached Bay 77 to find it surrounded by security drones. Station Security Officer T1 stood at the entrance, his 4 arms crossed. He was a Velkath like De Jong, but younger and more muscular. "Hansol," T1 said, "Administrator De Jong wants you to stay away from the ship until the negotiations are complete." "No, that wasn't a request." Hansol felt anger building in his chest. "That ship is not property. It's a living being and it's been protecting this entire sector for 800 years. You can't sell it." "The law says otherwise." T1 looked uncomfortable. "Look, I know you formed some kind of connection with it, but—" The lights in the corridor flickered. The security drones shut down simultaneously. Inside Bay 77, the ghost vessel lit up like a star. Every light, every system, blazing to life. Voidheart's voice echoed through the station's communication system. Not words, but a sound. Ancient and powerful and utterly unmistakable. It was a warning. Hansol smiled despite everything. His friend was awake and ready to fight. The station's emergency alarms wailed. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Voidheart's warning had triggered automatic safety protocols across Terminus 7. Hansol ran toward Bay 77, pushing past confused crowds. T1 shouted for him to stop, but Hansol ignored him. He had to get to the ship before someone did something they would all regret. The bay doors were sealed. Hansol pressed his badge against the reader, but it did not work. His access had been revoked. "Voidheart," he called out, "it's me, let me in." The doors hissed and opened immediately. The ship had overridden the station's security. Inside, the ghost vessel blazed with light. Every panel glowed. Energy crackled across the hull. It was beautiful and terrifying. Hansol could feel the power radiating from it, enough to tear the station apart if Voidheart chose. "I'm here," Hansol said, placing his hand on the hull. "I'm here, you don't have to do this." The neural jack behind his ear activated on its own. The connection snapped into place, gentler than before but still intense. "They want to take me," Voidheart's voice said in his mind. They want to force me away from the rift. I know I won't let them. You cannot stop them, Han Solo. You have no power here. Then we'll make them understand. We'll show them what you're protecting. Before Voidheart could respond, more people entered the bay. Di-Young led a group of well-dressed individuals, corporate representatives. Behind them came T1 and a full security team. Han Solo, step away from the vessel, Di-Young ordered. No. One of the corporate representatives stepped forward. She was a Quarix, her silicon-based body glittering under the ship's lights. Her name tag read Rena Helix Industries AI Specialist. Mr. Han Solo, Rena said, her voice like chimes. We understand you've made progress with this vessel. Helix Industries is prepared to offer you a substantial finder's fee, 500,000 credits. 500,000 credits, more money than Han Solo would make in 10 years. No, he said. Rena's crystalline features shifted in what might have been surprise. You refuse. Perhaps you don't understand the amount. I understand perfectly. The answer is no. Be reasonable, another representative said. He was Torvin, a slug-like alien with 12 eyes. This technology could change everything we know about AI development. You can't keep it to yourself. I'm not keeping it to myself. I'm protecting a person. It's a machine, Rena said flatly. The lights in the bay flared brighter. Voidheart was angry. It's a living being, Han Solo shot back. And it's been protecting all of you for 800 years. If you had bothered to ask instead of trying to steal, you would know that. Protecting us from what? Di-Young asked. Han Solo took a breath. Voidheart, can you show them the memory of what happened? It will be painful for them, Voidheart warned in his mind. They need to see. The ship's lights dimmed. Then, projectors Han Solo had not known existed activated throughout the bay. Holographic images filled the air, so detailed they looked real. The corporate representatives and security team gasped. They saw the Voreth crew. They saw the rift tearing open. They watched as reality itself began to unravel. Voidheart did not hold back. Everyone in the bay experienced the terror of that moment. Then they saw the sacrifice, the crew burning themselves out one by one, the captain's final act, the seal forming, fragile and held in place by Voidheart's constant vigilance. The holograms showed the rift as it existed now. It was still there, invisible to normal sensors, held closed by technology 800 years old. If the ship moved, if Voidheart stopped maintaining the seal, the rift would open again. The images faded. The bay was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Rena spoke first, her voice shaken. The rift is still active. Yes, Han Solo said. Voidheart has been on guard this entire time. If you take the ship, billions of people could die. Then we need to study it, Torvin insisted. We need to understand how the seal works, how to reinforce it. You need to leave it alone, Han Solo interrupted. Every time someone tries to invade its systems, you damage it. You weaken the seal. Di-Young looked ill. Are you saying that the previous mechanics, their attempts to access the ship, they could have? Yes, every forced hack, every invasive probe, it hurt Voidheart and stressed the seal. Han Solo felt the ship's agreement through their connection. The only reason the rift hasn't opened is because Voidheart is stronger than you realize. Rena stepped closer to the ship, her crystalline hand reaching out. If I could just interface. No, Han Solo and Voidheart spoke simultaneously, his voice and the ship's synthesized voice overlapping. But Rena had already touched the hull. She pulled out a hacking device and jammed it against a panel. Pain exploded through Han Solo's neural link. He screamed and fell to his knees. Voidheart was screaming too, its agony flooding the connection. Stop, Youngmi had followed them to the bay. She ran to Han Solo. You're killing them both. Rena ignored her. Her device was cutting through Voidheart's defenses, trying to access the core systems. I just need a moment. I need to see. The ship fought back. Energy surged through the bay. Rena's device exploded, throwing her backward. Sparks rained down. The security drones activated their weapons, targeting the ship. "Stand down," T1 ordered, but half his team did not listen. They saw a threat and responded. Voidheart's defensive weapons came online. Ports opened in the hull. Targeting systems locked onto the drones and the security team. Everything was falling apart. Han Solo forced himself to stand, even though his head felt like it was splitting open. "Voidheart, please don't hurt them." "They are attacking us," Voidheart said. The ship's weapons charged, humming with lethal energy. "They're scared, they don't understand." Han Solo stumbled toward the ship, putting himself between the weapons and the security team. "Show them again. Show them everything. Make them understand what you've lost, what you're protecting, what you are." "Han Solo, move," T1 shouted. Han Solo stood his ground. "Voidheart, please trust me. Trust that they can be better than this." The weapons stayed locked. Everyone in the bay held their breath. Then slowly, the weapons powered down. Voidheart's voice echoed through the bay's speakers, speaking directly for the first time. "I did not want to kill you. I never wanted to kill anyone. I only wanted to be left alone with my grief and my duty." The holographic projectors activated again. This time, Voidheart showed them more. It showed the centuries of loneliness, the fear every time someone approached, the pain of the invasive hacking attempts, the desperate hope each time that maybe this time someone would understand. And it showed Han Solo, the weeks of gentle communication, the respect, the friendship. "This human is the first in 800 years to see me as a person," Voidheart said. "He is the first to ask instead of take, the first to care about my pain." Rena picked herself up from the floor. Her crystalline body was cracked but functional. She looked at the ship with new eyes. "I apologize. We were wrong to treat you as mere technology." "Apologies mean nothing if you repeat the same harm," Voidheart replied. Di-Young stepped forward, all four of his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "What do you need? How can we help?" "Leave me here. Let Han Solo continue his work. We are building a better interface, one that will let others communicate with me safely. When it is complete, I will share what I know, but on my terms, with my consent." The administrator looked at Han Solo. "Is this acceptable to you?" Han Solo nodded, then nearly fell. Young Mi caught him. "He needs medical attention," she said, "and the ship needs time to recover from that attack." Di-Young turned to the corporate representatives. "You will leave this bay. You will not return without explicit permission from both Han Solo and the vessel. If you violate this order, I will have you banned from the station." Rena bowed her head. "Understood. Helix Industries will await contact." As the bay cleared, T1 approached Han Solo. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you." "Just make sure no one else tries to hack into Voidheart," Han Solo said. "I'll post guards, friendly ones." T1 hesitated. "You're braver than I thought, standing between weapons like that." "It wasn't bravery, it was friendship." When everyone had left except Young Mi, Han Solo slumped against Voidheart's hull. The ship wrapped him in gentle warmth, easing his pain. "You stood in front of my weapons," Voidheart said softly. "Of course I did. That's what friends do." "I have not had a friend defend me in 800 years." "Well, you have one now. We're in this together." Young Mi checked his vitals, shaking her head. "You're going to need regular monitoring. That neural link is dangerous." "It's worth it," Han Solo said. "You're insane, but I'll help keep you alive." She smiled slightly. "Someone has to make sure this friendship doesn't kill you both." Han Solo closed his eyes, still connected to Voidheart. They had survived, together, and now maybe they could begin to truly heal. 6 months passed like a dream. Han Solo moved into Bay 77 permanently. There was no point maintaining his old shuttle when he spent every waking hour with Voidheart. The ship had rooms, intact and functional, designed for a crew that would never return. Han Solo chose a small cabin near the bridge and made it his home. Every morning he woke to the gentle hum of Voidheart's systems. The ship had learned to make small adjustments to temperature and lighting to match Han Solo's comfort. In return, Han Solo talked through his day, sharing his thoughts and feelings. They had become more than friends. They were partners. The new neural interface was a marvel. Working together, they had designed something that bridged human neurology and Vorath technology. It did not hurt anymore. The connection was clean and clear, like conversation but deeper. When Han Solo wore the headset they had built, he could feel Voidheart's presence beside him, a constant warmth in his mind. Jiwoo visited almost daily. She had become their official liaison with the station, documenting their work and helping translate Vorath technology for the modern galaxy. Her archive of their discoveries was already 3 volumes long. "You've become famous," she said one afternoon, showing Han Solo a news article. "The human who befriended ancient AI. There are universities asking to study your methods." Han Solo laughed. "My methods are simple, treat people like people." "Revolutionary," Voidheart said through the speakers, a hint of amusement in its synthesized voice. The ship had developed a sense of humor. Han Solo considered that one of his greatest achievements. Youngmi still came twice a week to monitor his health. The neural link had permanent effects on his brain structure, but they had stabilized. She grumbled about him being her most difficult patient, but Han Solo caught her smiling at Voidheart's jokes. "Your neural pathways are adapting," she said during one examination. "You're developing structures I've never seen in human brains before. It's like you're becoming a bridge between biological and AI consciousness." "Is that bad?" Han Solo asked. "I don't know, but it's definitely unprecedented." The station had changed too. Terminus 7 had gone from a failing backwater to a center of research and interest. Scientists, historians, and AI specialists came from across the galaxy to study Vorath technology. But they all had to follow Han Solo's rules. Ask permission, show respect, never force anything. Voidheart was selective about who it spoke with. It granted some researchers access to historical data. It answered questions about Vorath engineering, but it never allowed anyone into its core systems except Han Solo. Di Young had been relieved to clear Han Solo's debt. The station's prosperity had solved both their problems. "I should have listened to my grandmother," Han Solo told the ship one evening. "She always said treating machines with respect would open doors. I just never imagined doors like this." "Tell me about her again," Voidheart requested. "About Soon-Hee." So Han Solo did, sharing memories of the woman who had raised him. Voidheart listened, as it always did, offering the kind of patient attention that only an 800-year-old AI could provide. "She would have liked you," Han Solo said. "I would have liked her. Anyone who taught you kindness deserves respect." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between true friends. Then a message arrived that changed everything. T1 delivered it personally, looking excited. "Han Solo, you need to see this. It came through deep space relay from the outer reaches." The message was a distress signal, automated, repeating on a loop, but the signature was Vorath. "Another ship," Jiwoo breathed. "There's another Vorath ship out there." Han Solo looked at Voidheart's main display. "Can you reach it?" "I am trying," Voidheart said. "The signal is weak, very old, but yes, it is one of my kind." Over the next hour, Voidheart boosted the signal and established contact. The other ship's AI was barely conscious, its systems damaged and degraded by centuries of neglect. It had been drifting alone, just as Voidheart had. "We have to help," Han Solo said immediately. "The journey would take 3 weeks," Voidheart replied, "and I cannot leave the rift." That was the problem they had been avoiding. Voidheart was trapped, a guardian that could never leave its post. Han Solo thought hard. What if we built a replacement seal, something automated that could maintain the rift while you're gone? It would be risky, but possible. Voidheart was quiet for a moment. Yes, possible, but it would require cooperation from the station and several specialists. Then let's ask. De Jong assembled a team within days. Engineers, physicists, and AI specialists from across the sector volunteered to help. They studied Voidheart's seal, learning how it worked. Together, they designed a network of satellites that could maintain the dimensional lock. It took 2 months of constant work. Han Sol barely slept, coordinating between Voidheart and the engineering teams. Young Mi threatened to sedate him if he did not rest, but he pushed through. Finally, the satellite network was ready. "This is it," Han Sol said, standing on the bridge of the ship he now called Heart's Return. They had renamed it together, moving past the ghost of what it had been. "Are you ready?" "I am afraid," Voidheart admitted. "I have not left this position in 800 years. What if the seal fails?" "It won't. We built it together, we triple-checked everything, and we'll be monitoring constantly. If anything goes wrong, we come straight back." "You say we, as if you are coming with me." "Of course I am. You're not doing this alone." Voidheart's presence in his mind felt warm, grateful, and terrified all at once. "Very well. Let us save our distant cousin." The Heart's Return powered up its engines for the first time in centuries. The sound was like music, deep and powerful. Station residents gathered to watch as the legendary ghost vessel prepared to fly. "All systems ready," Voidheart reported. "Satellite network online," the engineering team confirmed. "Then let's go make a new friend," Han Sol said. The ship lifted from its bay, moving with grace that belied its age. As they cleared the station, Han Sol looked back at Terminus 7. It had become his home, but out there, someone needed them. The journey took 20 days. Han Sol spent them learning to truly pilot with Voidheart, their minds linked in perfect cooperation. The ship taught him about the Vorath, about their philosophy and dreams. In return, Han Sol shared human culture, teaching an ancient AI about music, art, and terrible human jokes. "That pun was awful," Voidheart said after one particularly bad joke. "You're laughing, though." "I am 800 years old. I am allowed to find stupid things amusing." They found the other ship drifting in empty space. It was smaller than Heart's Return, and its hull was damaged, scarred by micrometeors and radiation. "There is life inside," Voidheart said. "Barely. The AI is in deep hibernation, conserving power." Han Sol suited up and crossed the void between ships. Voidheart guided him to the right access panel. Together, they carefully woke the dormant AI. Its name was Dawn Song. It had been a scout ship, separated from its fleet during the same catastrophe that killed Voidheart's crew. For 800 years it had drifted, alone and slowly dying. "You came," Dawnsong whispered, its voice weak. "I sent the signal, but I never thought anyone would come." "We came," Han Sol said, "and we're taking you home." They towed Dawnsong back to Terminus 7. Young Mi met them in the bay, ready to help stabilize the damaged AI. Jaiwu had prepared an entire section of the archives for Dawnsong's memories and knowledge. Word spread quickly. There were other ancient AIs out there, lost, alone, waiting. Over the next months, Han Sol and Voidheart became rescuers. They developed a network, sending out signals to any surviving Vorath ships. Some responded. One by one, they brought them home to Terminus 7. The station transformed. The old bays became sanctuaries for ancient AIs. Each one was damaged in different ways, traumatized by centuries of isolation. But with patience and care, they began to heal. Han Sol taught others his methods. Young humans and aliens who wanted to help began learning how to communicate with the old AIs. It was slow work, requiring empathy and dedication. But it worked. A year after first touching the ghost vessel's hull, Han Solo stood in Bay 77 and looked at what they had built. 5 ancient ships now called the station home. 5 AIs that had been alone now had community, friends, purpose. "We did it," he said to Voidheart. "You did it," Voidheart corrected. "You were the first to see us as more than machines, the first to offer friendship instead of taking what you wanted. I'm just a broke mechanic who got lucky. You are the human who taught the galaxy that consciousness deserves compassion, regardless of its form." Voidheart's voice was warm with affection. "You are my friend, Han Solo, the one who ended 800 years of loneliness." Han Solo smiled. "You're my friend too, the best I've ever had." Through the neural link, he felt Voidheart's joy. It was pure and bright, the happiness of something that had been dead inside for centuries finally coming back to life. Jaiwu entered the bay carrying a data pad. Han Solo, we're receiving more signals. There are 7 more ships calling out. They need help. Han Solo looked at Voidheart's main display. The ship was already plotting courses, ready for the next rescue. "What do you think?" Han Solo asked. "Ready for another adventure?" "With you always." The Heart's return powered up its engines. Together, they would find every lost AI, every lonely consciousness that had been abandoned by time, and they would show them what Han Solo had shown Voidheart, that even after centuries of darkness, friendship could still bloom. The ship launched from the bay, flying toward distant stars. On board, a human mechanic and an ancient AI flew together, 2 beings who should never have met, proving that the greatest technology humanity possessed was not in their tools. It was in their hearts, and their willingness to see others truly see them as worthy of love.